Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into a book that's really made waves in the leadership world, Extreme Ownership, by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin.
Yeah, this one's a game changer, especially if you're looking to build a high-performing team.
And these authors aren't just armchair theorists. They've walked the walk as Navy SEALs who led SEAL Task Unit Bruiser during the Battle of Ramadi.
Talk about a trial by fire. Ramadi was one of the most intense urban combat scenarios in recent history.
It was considered a lost cause at the time, but Jocko and Leif turned the tide and led their unit to become the most decorated special operations unit of the Iraq War.
They took those hard-won lessons from the battlefield and distilled them into this book, and the fascinating thing is how these principles apply beyond combat.
Exactly. It's about leadership in any team, any organization striving for success.
And that's why we're deep diving into it today, because these lessons are pure gold for you as young officers.
Whether you're leading a platoon, planning a training exercise, or even navigating your personal life, the insights in extreme ownership can really make a difference.
No doubt about it. So let's get into it, shall we? The foundation of everything in extreme ownership is, well, extreme ownership.
It sounds straightforward enough, but I bet there's more to it than meets the eye.
You bet. It's about taking 100% responsibility for everything that impacts your mission.
Everything.
Everything, not just your actions, but your team's performance, unforeseen circumstances, the whole 9 yards.
So no passing the buck, even when it's tempting.
Exactly. And they illustrate this perfectly with the story of the friendly fire incident.
Oh yeah, the one where a SEAL sniper team mistakenly engaged Iraqi soldiers.
Tragic situation, lots of confusion, lots of close calls.
And Leif Babin, the task unit commander at the time, took full responsibility even though he wasn't directly involved.
Yeah, he recognized that as the leader. The buck stopped with him.
Powerful stuff. And that kind of ownership, especially when things go wrong, it builds trust.
For sure, it shows your team that you're in the trenches with them.
Yeah.
You're not afraid to take responsibility.
Now think about that. In your role as an officer, imagine something goes wrong during a training exercise. What do? Do you point fingers? Or do you step up and take ownership?
Because that sets the tone for the whole unit. When leaders take responsibility, it inspires others to do the same.
It creates a culture of accountability, which reminds me of their bold statement, no bad teams, only bad leaders.
Ah, it's a classic. And they illustrated this with a story from their BU desk training the grueling SEAL selection process.
Yeah, Hell Week, I've heard the stories.
So they described the scenario with these competing boat crews. One crew was constantly at the bottom getting punished morale in the dumps.
And then?
The instructors did something interesting. They switched the leaders of the best and worst performing crews.
Wow, so what happened? Did things stay the same?
Not at all. The crew that was failing with the new leadership skyrocketed to the top. The other crew with the leader from the top performing crew, they started to falter.
Really, just from switching leaders?
It was a huge eye-opener. It showed the massive impact a leader has on a team's performance.
So it's not just about inherent talent or ability, it's about the leader creating the right environment for individuals to thrive.
Exactly. And that's a challenge for any leader to honestly assess their leadership style and ask, am I elevating my team? Am I creating conditions for success?
These first two principles really set the stage for a strong foundation. But how does understanding the why fit into all of this?
It's all about motivation and buy-in. You can't expect people to give their all if they don't understand the purpose behind their actions.
It's about connecting those dots between individual tasks and the overall mission.
You got it. And they had that great story about the SEALs initially resisting a mission in Ramadi to train Iraqi soldiers.
Not exactly what they signed up for.
Jocko, as the leader, recognized that resistance, and instead of forcing it, he took the time to explain the strategic importance of the task.
So he explained how training those Iraqi soldiers would ultimately help secure the region, reduce casualties, and achieve their broader objectives.
And it completely changed the SEALs' attitudes. They could see the value in what they were doing, how their actions contributed to something bigger.
This is so relevant for you as young officers. You'll be giving orders and leading troops in all sorts of situations.
Yeah.
Are you just going to bark orders, or are you going to explain the why behind the mission?
Because when people understand the purpose, when they see how their role fits into the bigger picture, that's when you get true commitment.
And speaking of clarity, their next principle is about keeping things simple, especially under pressure. Why is that so important?
Well, overcomplicating things can lead to disaster. Particularly in those high-pressure situations, you need clarity to make good decisions and execute effectively.
I see. And to illustrate this point, they actually used an anecdote from a business consulting project.
Yeah, it might seem a bit out of left field, but it makes a powerful point.
Okay, I'm curious, how does a business story connect to military leadership?
So they were consulting for this company that had implemented this crazy complex bonus system to incentivize their team.
Sounds good in theory, rewards for good work.
But this system was so convoluted, nobody understood how it works, not even the managers.
So the employees were working in the dark, unable to see the connection between their effort and the reward.
Exactly. And it led to confusion, frustration, and a drop in performance. The employees felt lost and demotivated.
So you're saying you can't expect people to be motivated if they don't understand the system or how their actions lead to results?
Precisely. It's like a rat in a maze that doesn't know why it received a sugar pellet.
Okay, I get it. So how do you apply this keep it simple principle in a military context?
Think about how you communicate plans or strategies to your troops, whether you're briefing a mission or explaining a new training protocol. Clarity is paramount.
Put yourself in the shoes of the person receiving the information. Can they understand it? Can they execute it effectively?
Because clear, concise communication, especially under pressure, is key to a team's success.
And it's not just about what you say, but how you say it. Avoid jargon. Use plain language. Make sure everyone's on the same page.
Well said. That's a good reminder for all of us, no matter what role we're in.
Now, this next principle, decentralized command, sounds like something the military already does well, at least in theory. What are your thoughts?
It's about empowering those closest to the action to make decisions, trusting your junior leaders to assess the situation and act accordingly.
And they had that pretty intense story about how this prevented a potential disaster in Ramadi, right? Something about a rooftop incident.
Yeah, during a large-scale operation, a Bradley fighting vehicle reported enemy snipers on a rooftop and was ready to engage.
Oh.
But Jocko, sensing something wasn't right, he paused the action. He needed confirmation before giving the order to fire.
And
Turns out those snipers were their own SEAL team, positioned in a different building than originally planned.
that could have been a disaster.
Absolutely. And it was decentralized command that prevented it. The SEAL commander on the ground had the authority to adjust his position based on the situation.
So they didn't have to wait for orders from higher up. They were empowered to make decisions on the fly.
Exactly, and that highlights why trusting your junior leaders and giving them the freedom to make decisions within their area of responsibility is so vital.
It's about empowering those on the front lines, those who have the most up-to-date information and the best understanding of the immediate situation.
Right, but it's not just about giving orders and letting them run wild. It's about setting clear expectations, communicating the overall mission, and making sure everyone, even when acting independently, is aligned toward the same objective.
So finding that balance between giving your junior officers the autonomy to make decisions while still ensuring they're working within the framework of the mission.
Exactly, and that takes practice, clear communication, and a willingness to trust those under your command.
It sounds like this principle is all about creating a culture of trust and empowerment.
It is, and when done, effectively decentralized command can lead to greater flexibility, faster decision-making, and ultimately better outcomes on the ground.
Now, this next principle feels like we're flipping the script a bit leading up the chain. What exactly does that mean?
It's about recognizing that communication goes both ways. Even as a junior leader, you have a responsibility to keep your superiors informed.
To proactively give them the information they need to support the mission.
Right, and Jocko and Leif actually had some experience with this early on in Ramadi. They were frustrated with what they perceived as excessive oversight from their commanding officer.
They felt like they were being micromanaged.
Exactly, bogged down with paperwork, constantly questioned, but then they had a realization their CO wasn't trying to stifle them. He was operating with limited information.
So their frustration stems from a lack of communication and understanding.
Exactly. They realized it was on them as leaders to provide their CO with a clearer picture of what was happening on the ground.
So they started proactively communicating more, providing detailed reports, anticipating their CO's concerns.
And it made a world of difference. Their CO felt more comfortable trusting them, and they had more freedom to operate.
So leading up is about making your superiors' jobs easier by giving them the information they need to support you effectively.
Exactly, and what's interesting is that shift in communication not only benefited their CAO, it also gave them more freedom to lead their team effectively.
It sounds like it created a more trusting and collaborative relationship with their commanding officer.
It did, and it's a reminder that leadership at all levels is about building relationships, communicating effectively, and understanding that everyone is working towards the same goal.
Leading up the chain is almost like a form of mentorship, isn't it? You're helping your superiors make the best decisions possible.
That's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing that everyone from the most junior officer to the highest ranking commander has a role to play in achieving success, and clear proactive communication is key to making that happen. And, when we're talking about supporting those above you, it really ties into another key concept from the book, Cover and Move.
Cover and move.
Okay.
I'm guessing that's where things get really interesting, especially in a joint operation.
Yeah, you got it. In essence, Cover and Move is all about teamwork. But on a larger scale, it's recognizing that you're not operating in a vacuum. Your success depends on the success of other teams, other units.
So they had some pretty vivid examples of this from Ramadi, right? Working with those Army and Marine units.
Absolutely. You've got SEALs, highly specialized, trained for very specific missions, and then you've got Army and Marine units with different capabilities, different areas of expertise.
But they all had to work together to achieve that overall objective of securing the city.
Exactly. And that meant understanding each other's strengths, coordinating movements, providing support where needed. It wasn't about competition, it was about collective success.
And didn't they have a story about some friction between a SEAL team and an Army unit operating in the same sector?
They did. It was a classic example of what not to do. Ego clashes, communication breakdowns, they weren't effectively communicating or sharing information.
So essentially they were working against each other, even though they had the same overall mission.
Exactly. And that lack of coordination, that breakdown and Cover and Move, it put lives at risk.
Because in a hostile environment, every decision, every action has consequences.
Right. And if you're not supporting each other, you're creating vulnerabilities that the enemy can and will exploit.
So how do you translate this cover and move principle to a young officer's career? What does it look like day to day?
It's about building relationships, and not just within your own unit. It's across branches, across departments. It's understanding how your role fits into the larger mission and how you can support other teams to achieve collective success.
So being proactive, reaching out, building those bridges with other units.
Exactly, because even if you're doing your job perfectly, if those other teams you're working with are struggling, it's going to impact the overall mission.
So think about how this applies within your battalion. Are you collaborating effectively with other companies? Are there communication breakdowns that could be impacting the mission?
It's about breaking down those silos, recognizing that you're all part of the same team, striving towards the same objective.
And, this principle goes beyond the military. It's relevant in any organization, even in our personal lives.
Absolutely. It's about seeing the bigger picture, the interconnectedness of it all, and that requires communication, empathy, and a willingness to go the extra mile to support those around you.
Because at the end of the day, it's not about individual success. It's about collective victory. That's a huge lesson for any leader.
It is, and one of the things that really resonated with me about extreme ownership was their emphasis on the human element of leadership.
Okay, so it's not just about tactics and strategies. It's about understanding people, building trust, leading with empathy.
You got it. And they actually have a whole chapter dedicated to discipline, which might seem counterintuitive at first.
Yeah, we tend to think of discipline as being rigid, restrictive.
But they actually frame it as the pathway to freedom.
Okay, now I'm really interested. Tell me more about that.
Think about it this way. When you have discipline procedures, when you've trained to a high standard, when everyone knows their role and executes it flawlessly, it actually creates more flexibility.
So it's not about being inflexible. It's about having that solid foundation that allows for adaptation in real-world situations.
Exactly. They used the example of their search procedures in Ramadi. Initially, they were using a pretty chaotic method, just tossing things around, looking for weapons or intel.
What they call the ransack.
Right. Effective to a point, but also inefficient and prone to errors. So they implemented a more disciplined system, assigning specific roles, creating a clear process for every step.
And did that slow them down? Did it make them less effective?
Not at all. In fact, it's interesting that this shift to a more disciplined approach didn't restrict them. It actually made them faster and more effective.
Because they were eliminating wasted effort, reducing errors, they were able to operate with more precision.
Precisely. And that translates to any team. Or really think about your own unit's procedures. Are they disciplined enough to allow for flexibility and adaptation in the field? Or are they creating unnecessary friction, slowing you down?
That's a good point to consider. So disciplined procedures don't actually restrict freedom. They create it because when everyone knows their role, it allows for more flexibility and adaptation when things get chaotic.
Well said. And, it's important to remember that this applies beyond the military, too. Think about your daily routines, your personal goals. Having those disciplined habits and processes can free up so much mental space and energy for creativity and problem solving.
It's about finding that balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Discipline that empowers, not restricts, discipline that creates freedom to act decisively when you need to.
And that brings us to another crucial point. They make the leader's role in fostering that kind of disciplined freedom within their team.
So it's not just about setting the standard. It's about creating an environment where people can actually rise to that standard.
Exactly. And that requires trust, clear communication, and a willingness to let go of control.
One of the things that really stuck with me was their emphasis on humility.
Right.
The idea that even as a leader, you're not expected to be perfect.
They were very open about their own mistakes, the lessons they learned, the times they fell short.
And that vulnerability is important, right? It shows that you're still learning, still growing.
Absolutely, because it creates space for others to do the same, to take risks, to make mistakes, to learn and grow.
And ultimately, that's how you build a team that's not afraid to fail, a team that's constantly striving to improve, a team that's capable of achieving remarkable things.
Couldn't have said it better myself, but there's a nuance to this humility, right? It's not about downplaying your role as a leader.
So it's not about being self-deprecating or putting yourself down.
Hey, it's about recognizing that leadership is a service, not a position of power.
And didn't they have a great quote about that? Something about proving yourself.
Yeah, they said, a leader has nothing to prove, but everything to prove.
Because your authority comes from your rank, your position,
Yeah.
but your true influence,
Yeah.
your ability to inspire people, that comes from your actions, your character, your commitment to the team.
Exactly. It's about leading by example, about putting the needs of the mission and the team above your own ego, about demonstrating through your actions that you're worthy of that trust and respect that your position demands.
And one of the toughest things for any leader, especially in a high-pressure environment, is balancing that decisive action with empathy, with understanding the human impact of your decisions.
Oh, absolutely. It's a constant balancing act. And they had a really poignant example of this from Ramadi dealing with a difficult situation within their own SEAL team.
Yeah, the story about the two warring leaders, wasn't it?
That's the one. You have these two highly skilled individuals, both essential to the team's success, but they were constantly clashing, undermining each other, creating this toxic environment.
This sounds like a nightmare for any leader. How do you even begin to address that?
It was a tough situation, and it was impacting the entire unit's performance, so their CO, faced with this dilemma, he had to make a tough call.
He had to choose between trying to preserve these individuals and protecting the team as a whole.
Exactly, and ultimately he decided to fire them both, which might seem extreme on the surface. You're losing two key players.
But I guess the point they were making is that sometimes for the good of the team, you have to make those hard decisions, even if it means some short-term pain.
Right, because that kind of toxicity, that lack of alignment, it can spread like a virus, and it sends a message that no matter how talented you are, if you're not willing to put the team first, if you're not willing to cover and move, then you're not part of the solution.
So it's about creating that culture of accountability where everyone is responsible for their actions and where the collective good is always more important than individual ego.
Well said, and that's a lesson that resonates far beyond the battlefield.
Absolutely. It applies to families, friendships, even personal goals. Sometimes for the sake of the mission, we have to make tough choices, even if they involve letting go of individuals who are detrimental to the well-being of the group.
It's about making those decisions that serve the greater good.
And recognizing that sometimes letting go can be the ultimate act of leadership, both for the individual and the team as a whole.
Yeah, it's a tough but necessary lesson. Sometimes you have to make those hard calls for the good of the team.
Exactly. And it takes courage to make those calls and a deep understanding of the dynamics at play. But in the end, those tough decisions, they really do contribute to building a stronger, more cohesive team.
And, speaking of building a strong team, they also talk a lot about leading up the chain. Didn't we touch on that a bit earlier?
We did. It's that idea of proactively keeping your superiors informed and providing them with the information they need to effectively support the mission. But there's more to it than just keeping them in the loop.
Oh, okay. I'm listening. So what else should we consider when we're leading up?
It's about understanding that your superiors, they're not all knowing. They rely on the information you provide to make those informed decisions. So if the information you're giving them is incomplete or inaccurate, it's on you to correct that.
So it's not just about reporting up, it's about proactively shaping their understanding of the situation. Exactly. You've got to anticipate their needs, provide context, paint a clear picture of what's happening on the ground.
That makes sense. The better informed they are, the better equipped they'll be to support you in the mission.
Precisely. And here's an interesting thing. When your superiors trust your judgment and feel confident in your abilities, they're more likely to give you the freedom and autonomy you need to operate effectively.
It's like we were talking about earlier, leading up effectively can actually give you more autonomy in the long run.
That's a great point. It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? But it really highlights the importance of building those strong relationships and that foundation of trust within the chain of command.
It really reinforces that idea that leadership is a two-way street communication, both up and down the chain, is essential for success.
Now, one of the most interesting and maybe unexpected parts of extreme ownership was the emphasis they put on leading with love.
Yeah, it might sound a little out of place in a book about combat leadership.
Right, but it's not about being sentimental or soft. It's about genuinely caring for your team, putting their needs first.
And that actually ties in really well with their core principle of extreme ownership. If you truly care about your team, you'll take full responsibility for their success, their safety, their development.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing their humanity, understanding their strengths and weaknesses, and supporting their growth as individuals.
As young officers, you'll be leading people who are literally entrusting you with their lives. That's a huge responsibility.
It is, and it requires more than just giving orders. It demands building genuine connections, fostering trust, and leading with empathy.
Remember that story they told about the SEAL who was struggling during training? He was on the verge of quitting.
Yeah, instead of giving up on him, they took the time to understand his struggles and helped him overcome those challenges.
That's what leading with love looks like in action. It's about helping each individual reach their full potential.
Because, like they say, a team is only as strong as its weakest link. Leading with love isn't just about being nice, it's about creating a culture of excellence where everyone is supported, challenged, and inspired to grow.
It's about balancing those high standards with genuine care and understanding for the individuals on your team.
Exactly. And that brings us back full circle to you as you progress in your careers. Remember these principles we've talked about today.
Extreme ownership. No bad teams, only bad leaders. Understanding the wise simplicity, decentralized command, leading up the chain, discipline equals freedom, and leading with love.
These aren't just slogans. They're powerful tools that can help you build extraordinary teams, achieve those remarkable results, and make a real difference in the world.
So as you face new challenges and take on more responsibility, remember to keep learning, keep growing, and keep pushing yourselves and your teams to be better.
Because the world needs leaders like you. Leaders who are committed to excellence, willing to take ownership, and driven by a deep sense of purpose.
Leadership is a journey, not a destination. So embrace the challenges, learn from your experiences, and never stop striving to be the best leaders you can be.
And that's a wrap for this deep dive, folks. Until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and keep owning it.